The House of Representatives had another hearing about Benghazi, and this time it was actually about what happened in Benghazi. Yes, of course, it included what happened on the Sunday talk shows after Benghazi that featured UN Ambassador Susan Rice, but the focus, for once, was actually more on what happened that night when the American ambassador and 3 others were murdered in Libya.
Later, when I heard that the situation had evolved to them going to a safe haven, and then the fact that we could not find the ambassador, I alerted my leadership, indicating that we needed to go forward and consider the deployment of the Foreign Emergency Support Team. I notified the White House of my idea. They indicated that meetings had already taken place that evening that had taken FEST out of the menu of options. I called the office within the State Department that had been represented there, asking them why it had been taken off the table, and was told that it was not the right time and it was not the team that needed to go right then.
What clearly emerged in the testimony is that in Washington, the State Department and the White House recognized the severity of the problem all along and were intently focused on the action in Benghazi. Republicans at the hearing believe that the passage you just heard proves that the Obama administration handled the crisis badly because they did not immediately send the Foreign Emergency Support Team. But no one who could have explained why the Foreign Emergency Support Team was not sent was allowed to testify at today's hearing, which was exclusively focused on 3 men the Republicans kept calling whistleblowers. But a whistleblower tells you something from inside an organization that the organization doesn't want you to know. I watched the hearing hoping to learn something that the government didn't want me to know, and the Republicans had the hearing hoping to find out something that Hillary Clinton didn't want you to know. And here's what their star witness had to say about Hillary Clinton.
At about 2 p.m., the Secretary of State Clinton called me, along with her senior staff. We're all on the phone. And she asked me what was going on, and I briefed her on the developments.
What emerged clearly in the hearing today is that there were no military assets within range that could have prevented what happened in Benghazi that night.
At about 10:45 or 11 o'clock, we confer, and I asked the defense attaché who'd been talking with AFRICOM and with the Joint Staff, is anything coming? Will they be sending us any help? Is there something out there? And he answered that the nearest help was in Aviano, and the nearest where there were fighter planes. And he said that it would take 2 to 3 hours for them to get on site, but that there also were no tankers available for them to refuel.
And Gregory Hicks told of a disturbing disagreement with the military that night about when to send a rescue team from Tripoli to Benghazi.
People in Benghazi had been fighting all night. They were tired, they were exhausted. We wanted to make sure the airport was secure for their withdrawal. As Colonel Gibson and his 3 personnel were getting in the cars, he stopped and he called them off and told me that he had not been authorized to go. And Colonel Gibson was furious. I had told him to go bring our people home. That's what he wanted to do. Paid me a very nice compliment. I won't repeat it here. So the plane went. I think it landed in Benghazi around 7:30.
So what you have there was a disagreement between the people on the ground in Libya and the military commanders somewhere else who delayed the authorization of the flight to Benghazi. But even if the flight had gone as soon as possible, according to the testimony we heard today, it would have arrived after the damage was done. And if this was a hearing run by a chairman who actually wanted to get at the truth of how and why things happened, the next witness you would turn to would be a military witness who could explain why there was a delay in the flight, perhaps the military officer who ordered the delay. You would also call a witness to explain why the Foreign Emergency Support Team was not authorized to go to Benghazi immediately. Democrats actually requested that the chairman include those witnesses, but the chairman refused. And so in today's hearing, we learned what it felt like to be with the embassy staff in Tripoli that night, knowing that your colleagues were under attack in Benghazi. We learned how confusing the flow of information was to and from Libya that night. We heard about some things that weren't done, but we never heard even the slightest possible explanation for why they weren't done. And we didn't hear about one thing that could have been done that would have changed the outcome of the attacks. But of course, we did hear about Sunday Talk Television.
So fast forward, Mr. Hicks, to the Sunday talk shows and Ambassador Susan Rice. She blamed this attack on a video. In fact, she did it 5 different times. What was your reaction to that?
I was stunned. My jaw dropped. And I was embarrassed.
Joining me now is Washington Post columnist E.J. Dionne. E.J., so no changed facts. Nothing in the condition of this Benghazi situation here in Washington changed as a result of this hearing, unless I missed something.
Well, I missed it too. I mean, we're almost at the point where some people seem to believe if you say Benghazi backwards 5 times, a conspiracy will magically appear. I mean, if you look at today, Dana Milbank has a piece up tonight where I think he got it exactly right. He said they summoned a whistleblower to Capitol Hill, but instead they got a virtuoso storyteller. Mr. Hicks was amazing, and you could see it in that video. And as Dana goes on to say, his gripes were about bureaucratic squabbling rather than political scandal. Yes, there are some questions to ask, and as you suggest, there are answers we might get, but these hearings don't seem to be about that. What really struck me is the difference between this hearing and the actual Watergate hearings. They keep trying to compare this to Watergate. If you go back to Sam Ervin, a conservative Democrat who was very nonpartisan, those were bipartisan hearings where they got to a conspiracy after assembling the facts. In this case, they seem to have several conspiracies in mind and keep looking to see if there are facts that can back up their preconceived notion.
The Watergate hearings actually had humility. Hard to believe, yes. But the questioners were kind of humbly going forward, and you could see with a lot of them, it was a grim duty. They kind of didn't want it to be this bad. And these guys had a political conspiracy from the start, which was Susan Rice was sent out there by the campaign to say it was a movie that did it, not Al-Qaeda that did it, because President Obama protects you from Al-Qaeda. There was this campaign idea, and now they're trying to re-engineer the scandal stuff all the way into what happened that night. They're trying to get it going at both ends of this thing.
Right. And I mean, when I watched Susan Rice say that, I myself was surprised, because it struck me at the time that this started with the movie and the reaction against the movie, but it looked like there was something organized there, which eventually is what happened. But she was briefed to say that, and she said that, and the CIA was worried about naming Al-Qaeda and creating all kinds of other problems, so she was kind of stuck. But the notion that what somebody says on a talk show at all is related to some vast conspiracy, the administration did its own investigation, and it wasn't like it was a whitewash. They said a whole bunch of things went wrong, and they, and Mr. Hicks himself in the testimony today, Mr. Ice is trying to say, well, Hillary Clinton signed all these cables. Well, he testified she signed every cable. It's the normal thing. So I just think I wish we could just investigate and not start out with a
And Elijah Cummings brought out what the military leaders have already said about this, both what Secretary Panetta has said, what General Dempsey has said. General Dempsey said it might have taken them 20 hours to get any kind of airplanes there. You know, Elijah Cummings invited Mr. Hicks or any of the witnesses to disagree with the military leaders, and they did not. I mean, these weren't witnesses trying to fight this political fight that the Republican members were trying to fight.
Right, and it's interesting because you wonder why don't, if the Republicans are trying to say the military guys made a wrong decision, and that's not, you know, that's not a crazy view.
Yeah, go ahead.
The military makes mistakes. Yeah. Go say it, then have them come and challenge them. But they don't seem to want to do that.
And the likelihood of people making bad calls somewhere in that 12 hours is very high. You've got a minimum of a 50% chance that some of the military involved made what we now know is a bad call. But let's get to that if that's what you want to investigate here.
Right. And the other thing I hope comes out of this, I mean, I think we'd agree we haven't done enough to honor our troops when they get home and to help them out. We pay no attention to the risks that people in the State Department take. I've been abroad. I've watched these folks. They are very courageous folks. It shouldn't take for people being killed to remind us.
That was one of the great things about Gregory Hicks' testimony today, to actually get that point across clearly. E.J. Dionne, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.